Hello, and welcome to another Thaliondor video. My name's Nicholas Oscar, and in this video, we'll be going over the most used weapon sets for all classes, their benefits and their shortcomings, as well as where they fit into the meta. We'll only be going over the weapon sets, not class builds, as we'll touch on class builds in another video. But what we will do is touch on what classes can make use of each weapon set and our opinions on them. Of course, skill is involved with any weapon, and if you really want to play a certain weapon, don't let this video be the reason you don't. Anyway, let's get into it. Sword and board. Old reliable, old faithful, old trusty sword and board. Sword and board is the tried and true weapon of all of foam fighting. If you go to any foam fighting park, the majority of fighters are going to be using good old S&B, unless you're here in Florida, of course. And there's good reason for this. Sword and board is arguably the lowest skill floor, allowing new players to fight longer than any other weapon set. So long as you keep the shield in front of you, it will do its job. Sword and board is obviously the most defensive setup you can get, especially if you lean in hard using a tower shield or a strap to have better control over your board. The style that you can play with sword and board also varies greatly depending on your setup. You can use a punch style or a strap, you can use a round or a kite or a teardrop, or any combination to suit your fighting style. Your sword can vary in length as well, flat or omni. The only downside to sword and board is the limited range, and depending on the shield, limited shot availability. But this can be circumvented by using a punch or a smaller shield, trading more shots for less defense. Sword and board tend to beat out polearms, but have trouble dealing with red or Florentine depending on the fighters, but are usually fine with dealing with everything. It's pretty good across the board. As for classes, fighter and cleric can use this weapon set. High-ranked sword and board fighters are hard to shut down with their near-infinite self-sustain, and clerics can run a more backline defensive build, using the shield while sacrificing some spell slots to give more defense to the squishier classes on the backline. If you're new at the game, or like a more tank role, sword and board might be the weapon set for you. Two-handed weapon, or red weapon. Two-handed, or red for short, is every Berserk fan's favorite weapon, and a must-have if you're down in the swamps of Florida. Not sure why, but red weapons are definitely the most popular down here. I think it's just the Florida man in all of us. Anyway, reds are the fighter-exclusive weapon, and what they lose in defense they make up for in offense, having more range and being the only weapon type to break shields and deal with armor. Red has a higher skill floor than something like sword and board, but even if you're new, it's not too hard to help your team out, whether that be taking someone's leg out from under them or start breaking shields. The major downside to the weapon is that it's both your offense and your defense, having to rely heavily on handle blocks or evasive movement to refrain from taking damage. At Thaliondor, however, you can wear a small buckler that forces you to give up some shots but gives you some defense, which you'll need as archers and wizards love to shoot reds, as they're the easiest to turn into pin cushions. I can attest to this. Reds do well against boards that are stuck in place, and can beat some Florentine, especially if you can sneak in a leg shot, but usually struggle against polearms or spears that outrange them. There are multiple types of red weapons, like swords, bats, axes, and hammers. Unfortunately for the latter, swords and bats are just objectively better than axes and hammers in the current build of most games. While axes and hammers have their niche, limiting your striking surface to a small surface area usually winds up costing you in the long run, but boy do you look good swinging it. And sometimes, drip is half the battle. The other half is extreme violence. But if you want to play a barbarian-style, big sword-swinging berserker, red is the weapon for you. Polearm and Spear. The reason that Spear are the #1 weapon in every army of every country everywhere is because they are the best. When it comes to melee weapons, it is. Range is always king. When it comes to melee weapons, polearms and spears are the #1 killers of the field. At Thaliondor, with up to 8 feet of range, you can really reach out and touch somebody. While spears lack the swing function, only worrying about stabbing, their less padded construction allows for rapid-fire stabs exceptionally fast. Glaives, on the other hand, can deal red damage but are slower than spears at range, and lack the close-up scrap potential that a regular red has. Like reds, the skill floor is a bit higher than sword and board, but as long as you have a teammate to protect you when someone rushes you down, you can get a ton of kills with any polearm. Polearms tend to beat reds in 1v1s, but lose out to sword and boards. If you want to play a more self-sufficient spear and defend yourself more, you can play fighter with a buckler. But if you want a real cheese meta strat, polearm, wizard, and cleric are sleeper builds that are really strong. If you find any of these appealing, pick up a spear. Florentine, or flow, or dual wielding. Somebody has been watching too much sword art, Is sword art even relevant anymore? Do people still watch that? Do people even get my references? Am I too old? Anyway, flow is the term for dual-wielding shorter weapons or blues. And I'll be the first to tell you, and maybe this is a hot take, but in a 1v1 scenario, a good flow beats every other weapon set, but they do struggle on the field. And here's why I say that. Flow has rapid hit damage potential, but lack range, so as long as you're quick on your feet, getting into your damage range can secure you a kill as long as you don't take damage. The skill floor for flow is probably the highest out of all of the weapon sets, since you have to have fast hands and quick feet. Not losing your legs is the biggest hurdle, as you need them to get close to deal damage. The other hurdle is switching your brain from this hand defends and this hand attacks to this hand attacks and this hand defends. But once you get both of those down in a 1v1 scenario, you'll be hard pressed to lose a fight. Until then, or in any field scenario, you might be having a rough time. But watching someone who is good at flow, field fight, and stay alive is a sight to behold. And that could be you, if you work at it. Fighter is the main flow class, using the self-sustain abilities to keep them in the fight longer, but archers can also flow, especially if you main chakrams or have a rig to keep all your equipment on you. If dual wielding is what sings to you, flow might be your best set, just expect a grind. Now those are the main melee weapon sets. Let's talk about some offshoots you might see on the field in rapid fire succession. Hoplite and shield. A light short spear and shield is an interesting playstyle that can be hard to master but satisfying to pull off. Fighters are the best class for this, because in a worst case scenario you can ditch the spear and pick up a sword. But I've seen clerics, especially high level clerics, make this super useful with their healing totem ability. Flails. While an easy noob killer, flails struggle with follow-up shots. And if you don't get the kill on the first swing, you might be having a rough time. That being said, if you don't know how to fight against the flail, the first swing is probably going to kill you. Single blue and downstick. Kind of the same idea as a hoplite. You're sacrificing a shield for more damage. Downspear can land some cheeky shots, and if they rush you down, you blue them down. I don't know why, but people seem to forget that the blue is in your hand. If you're fighting against someone who's using single blue and downstick, don't forget about the blue. Single blue. Okay, show off. Not everyone can be as cool as a singular sword. Single blue is a lot like a red, but you get no range, and you're a bit faster. But you lose out on red damage, but if you can make it work, do it to them. For a wizard and cleric, getting the extra spell slots would be the main reason that you do it, but if you can do it as a fighter, make it work. Dual reds. Stop it. Get some help. Scythes. Alright, now you're just trying to piss me off. Punch or fist weapons. Those are illegal. A gun. Alright, and that's the end of this video. I hope you've learned something or had a good time listening to me rant on. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, make sure to leave a comment down below. And let us know what your favorite weapon set is and why. Until next time, see you later.